Thanks for coming. Nice of you to join us. My name is Nick Harkarian. I'm the superintendent. We have with us here a handful of people on site and helping out. We have our athletic director, Mr. Shell is here. Our high school principal, Mr. Crouse is here. Our our assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum and instruction is here. Ms. Fox, she had to, I guess, step away for a moment. And Mr. Fackelman was kind enough to join us and help us here with a little videotaping and our technical setup. So I also see Ms. Stappenbeck is here. You know, mental block. I got Stappenbeck, Howard. It's great. Ms. Howard is here. And my eyes are telling me I think that's Ms. Rayfields, who's hanging out working there as well. So thanks for joining us tonight. We're really happy to have gotten started here on a series of meetings where we just want to talk and have a chance to listen, questions, and honest conversation on some of the topics that we've been working on in association with our strategic plan, some of the things that came up actually when we worked in this very space last fall. And we put together, with the help of New Jersey school boards, a plan of agenda items to work on over the next 3 to 5 years. And one of the things that came up was curriculum, in particular the health curriculum, especially with all that went on last year, and trying to make some more time available to work on health and wellness using the health curriculum wherever we could, obviously in addition to other measures. So with all that said, Mr. Shello was kind enough to work with his staff and put together a presentation that kind of outlines what's going on right now, in particular with the health program, and you'll notice probably more conversation and emphasis on the high school program because that is where we added some time this year, and so Mr. Shell is going to speak to us about that and how it has impacted what we're going to try to do this year for the first time, and obviously we'll see how it goes. So with that said, Mr. Shell, thank you very much for being here tonight. I know it makes for a long day, so thanks for being here.
Thanks everyone for coming. We weren't sure what we would have in terms of a turnout tonight. Was it going to be 100? Was it going to be 5? And I appreciate that people have made the effort to come out on what's going to be cold weather, just so that we can share what's happening with our health program and hopefully answer questions as well as get feedback from you. All right, so our goals tonight, from our perspective, one is to provide an overview of the total high school health curriculum. If you saw or were at the board med meeting I did with that, you'll see some of the same information that was presented there last week with additional information and hopefully answer some of the questions that we heard that night as well. To give you a closer look into the 10th grade program of instruction, the handout you have is from Kim Clark, one of our teachers. It's a syllabus for her classes that she'll be teaching that course. I think the others will be relatively similar to that as well for the other teachers. To provide a look into some of the classroom activities, to provide information as well on our future plans, and lastly, to answer your questions and gather your feedback in a, I want to say a low stress, and a more relaxed forum so that we can have maybe some honest dialogue on your feedback and questions you have from myself or any of the other administrators that are here. One of the questions that came along last year was why is more health needed? We have health starting in kindergarten every year, right up to the 12th grade. And there's several reasons. A couple I have listed here, and I will show you some of these things. One is the number of increasing laws and statutes relative to health instruction. All the time, there are new things happening going on in society that right away get put into the health curriculum. When I started here 22 years ago, one of the things that we were proud of at the time was that in junior health, that whole marking period was CPR first aid. And every student came out and got certified. But with so many things continually being added, we can no longer do that. We couldn't spend that much time on that one area. It's unfortunate. We still offer it. We do have avenues for kids to become certified, but it's not the full year. Of course, I'll show you a little bit on the New Jersey Student Learning Standards for Comprehensive Health and Physical Education. We'll also talk about ongoing social and society issues presently troubling our youth. I think we all want to know. One thing to do is to keep our youth safe. There's a lot of challenges for our kids. As a parent of no longer teenagers, but young adults myself, it's scary. It's scary what the kids grow up today. And then lastly, of course, teenage stress and suicide prevention concerns. All right, over the last few years, recent developments in our health education. About 4 or 5 years ago, we met with professionals from Rutgers University, did intensive work on alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, ATI. Then the issues of stress, mental health, suicide prevention became prevalent. Then opioids came, and we have heard the stories of some of our alums that have been involved with opioid issues. In the last couple of years now, vaping, which I think we're all familiar with. Most recently, character education, social emotional learning is a big piece of our goals as a district, as well as our curriculum of health. And then modification in how we present health. We're gradually going to transition into a more skills-based health instructional model. And I won't read all these, but these are not all, but some of the legislative statutes that have come about in the last 10 years. All this going down. Obviously, we don't spend in our community a lot of time on gang violence education, which is one of them there, but it has to be brought about at some point. As you can see, there's a lot of things, a lot of critical issues there. Mike, what? Presentation will be put up on the website.
Yeah, and we're recording it too.
It's being recorded as well. All right, so New Jersey Student Learning Standards. Now these are every subject in education in New Jersey follows these guidelines set forth by the Jersey Department of Education. In health education, there are several learning standards, which I'll review, and these all have progress indicators at the various grade levels listed at the bottom there, grades 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12. So it's a developing or progressing guideline that we follow. Number 2.1, all students will acquire health promotion concepts and skills to support a healthy, active lifestyle. Very general topic. But then that would include areas of personal growth and development, nutrition, disease and health conditions, safety, and social and emotional health. All right. Again, under all of those areas, there's a page or two of progress indicators for all the grade levels. 2.2, integrated skills. All students will develop and use personal and interpersonal skills to support a healthy and active lifestyle. And this includes interpersonal communication, decision-making and goal setting, character development, advocacy and service, health services and information. So, those that might be close to my age, it's very different than the health that you have as a student. When you talk about interpersonal communication in a health class, decision-making, goal setting, we didn't have in a health class, and now it's required. And we believe it's very, very important, and we strive to do a great job with it. All right, 2.3, drugs and medicines. All students will acquire knowledge about alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, in medicines and apply these concepts to support a healthy and active lifestyle. The ongoing theme is healthy and active lifestyle. And we talk about medicines, what's in our medicine cabinets, and things of that nature. Again, the substance abuse issues, alcohol, tobacco, etc., and dependency, addiction, and treatment. Human relationships and sexuality. All students will acquire knowledge about the physical, emotional, and social aspects of human relationships, sexuality, and apply these concepts to support, again, a healthy and active lifestyle. So we talk about relationships, human sexuality, pregnancy and parenting. Sensitive topics, certainly, but also, I believe, very critical topics for our students. All right, so what did we do this year? Last January, we presented in our curriculum review at that time, had made a recommendation of increasing health to add full marking period course in the 10th grade. And obviously there was a little bit of controversy with that was that much time really necessary? There was an issue with option 2, and kids not being in an option 2 study hall, etc. So after a lot of work and looking at various models of, let's say, out-of-the-box ideas of doing large group presentations and things, that we kind of all agreed on, let's extend Health 10 by 3 weeks. Now, Health 10, one market period, first market period is all driver education, so it's not really any health-related issues. So students are not getting any health instruction from grade 9 at the end of the year until grade 11 in the third market period. So it's almost a 2-year period. And we felt that there was a gap there that needed to be filled. We revamped the scope and sequence of the health curriculum across all grades in the high school, so that's grades 9 through 12. And lastly, we developed a document similar to a textbook teacher's edition, more or less, for health instructors. It includes suggested learning activities and sources that they can use and reference to, and it's all based on the New Jersey standards. All right, and that's been a very helpful tool for us. All right, so as I talked about before, when do students take out? This just kind of shows you. If you see here, students in 9th grade going across the spectrum. Their first market period, they're in Project Venture, they're in Phys Ed. In the second, third market periods, and then the fourth market period, they are in Health 9. So this is actually one 9-week market period. The 2A just represents the 3-week unit for 10th graders to take out. All right, so this also, the line green shows the time they go from having health instruction at 9th grade level when they get it again in 11th grade. 10th grade now, driver ed, 3 weeks of health, and physical education the rest of the year. And 11th grade, straight through physical education, market periods 1 and 2, health in the third, and physical education in the fourth. And then lastly, seniors take health second market.
But not the 2A?
Yes, 2 and 2A is all part of the second market. Okay, so this is a 9-week market period for the seniors. Okay, this is a 3-week unit for the sophomores. Okay. All right, and the nature of health instruction. We see health instruction not only as yes, there's a curricular piece and there's grading and accountability and things that go with instruction, but it's not meant to be an overly demanding, overly burdensome course. Right? We don't have AP, we don't have honors, we don't have college prep, or what have you. It's a generic curriculum across all students in each grade level. The idea in the classes is not lecture-based per se, although there is time for lecture, because information has to be given out. but it's activity-based, discussion-based, things where we want students to be actively involved in the classes, not to just sit and take notes and regurgitate that in an assessment or a test or something. There is some homework, but it's limited. And again, the amount of homework and out-of-class work is not that significant. You would see a lot of project-based activities, whether it's individual student projects or group type projects. Right? And the grading commonly reflects active participation and engagement as opposed to written assessments. That's true. Somebody had asked at the board meeting last week about students who introverted, shy, what have you, or not comfortable talking in the public forum about such many sensitive topics. And that's recognized and understood. And there are other areas for students that earn their grades with the student projects. So I think that's just one part of the assessment, total assessment. It's certainly not the whole thing. All right, here you see our curricular topics by grade. And there's kind of a strand where many of these things weave through the different grade levels. I don't think we want some pictures of that. Yeah, it will be up on the website. But we're going to cover in 9th grade: confidence and self-esteem, suicide prevention, self-advocacy, refusal skills. So they're getting pieces of that. Years ago, you might have had a health curriculum that was nutrition, exercise, fitness, wellness, for that whole market. We would have had driver education here. We would have had first aid CPR here. We would have had family living and human sexuality here at the 12th grade level. We're not doing it that way. We've kind of interspersed things within one another. There's strands all the way through. Because we feel that some of these things need to be taught earlier and earlier. Get the students exposed to it. Same is true at the middle school. In that, most of those subject areas are in the middle school curriculum, starting in 6th grade. All right, grade 10 health is 15 days, 3 weeks, and it's these 3 areas. Drug and alcohol education, which by law has to be done every year. Suicide prevention, mental health stigma. We talk a lot in this area about the stigma of mental health issues and being able to talk about it, how you can get help into that nature. And lastly, safe sex practices and contraception. And as I said, you have a copy of this sample from Ms. Clark. This is more or less what her syllabus will be for her class. Our other teachers were working on these presently, and it's a community group project for teachers. Putting this together, they share ideas back and forth in our meetings and things, so that we should be getting the same message from all the teachers. I can. Ms. Clark's not here, right? So a little bit on this. So she presents an introduction there, the purpose of the course, and the bolded terms are any terms that refer to skills-based health instruction, and that's why they are bold. We'll see if I move this up. Drugs and alcohol is the first week. And who has an assignment? All right, so sample here, making decisions about drugs and alcohol. Use the DECIDE method. You see what the acronym is there. So the first part, number one, research. Research a current event or news story featuring teens and drug alcohol abuse. Find as much information as you can about the story, at least 3 resources. List your resources below. All right, then the student would then go ahead and summarize the story in the space below. All right, analyze the decision, and then they will share that out with the rest of the class. And it could be simple. You probably see a story like the young man from Hunter Central that was involved in the hazing and drinking institute at State University a couple years ago. It might be a story like that that could be used, or anything. You got to do is like this is something you pick up the news, go to India.com or whatever, or something in this topic that we see with that. Suicide prevention and mental health stigma. Students will begin to explore mental health and the stigma surrounding mental health issues for teens in the National community and society in general, I would say. If I show you this, this is a PowerPoint presentation.
Each of these links are in the curriculum document, so you can access these later, either by going to this presentation or by going to the curriculum document. So we're just showing you what's in the curriculum document.
This was actually made by Tony Anthony, who's one of our student assistance counselors. And I think it's very informative. It's worth watching. I'm scrolling back. I forgot about all these things. Not having taught this material in so long. And it's probably far more in there than what we knew when I was teaching. But here's some ideas on the teenage brain and emotions. Most of you have high school students here, right? Are they emotional? Mine were, certainly. All right, this is a nice quote. The teenage brain is not just an adult brain with fewer miles on it. It's a paradoxical time of development. There are people with very sharp brains, but they're not quite sure what to do with them. This is from a professor of neurology at Children's Hospital in Boston, Harvard Medical School. So I'll just give you a little overview. I'm not going to go through this whole PowerPoint as well. But this is kind of interesting right here, this one quote. Many mental disorders appear during adolescence. All the big changes the brain is experiencing may explain why adolescence is the time when many mental disorders such as schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and eating disorders will emerge. Lastly, safe sex practices, contraceptives, and STIs. Again, 1 week unit. Students will deepen their understanding of safe sex practices, including abstinence, contraceptive use, and STI screening. Students will explore the benefits of abstinence and the consequences of unsafe sex, resources available through healthcare providers. You will see when we talk about safe sex practices required by law, do is the focus or emphasis is that abstinence is the #1 most successful method of prevention of sexually transmitted diseases and also pregnancy. All right, and that is the focus of our program as well. That is the emphasis. It's interesting, we saw it today at NJ.com, there was a story about the increase in sexually transmitted diseases nationwide, which has been low for quite a while, and coming back up again. be at lunchtime taking a look at NG.com and happy to see that. So again, PowerPoint that a teacher can use on safe sex practices, which again, I believe this is Ms. Clark's. And I talk about how you define sex. What is it? What does sex include? We can all acknowledge that there are positive and negative outcomes to sex. Consider some of the consequences of any of the definitions of sex. Talk about negative consequences. What is contraceptive dual use? Meaning talking about preventing pregnancy, preventing STIs. Condoms look like. Other types of birth control as well. So again, that's there for you to see as well on your own, but the information is there for you. Again, here are just some other resources in grade 10 that are available to teachers. I imagine most of them will use these. It's possible that they might not have all. They might have some other resources. One I like here, I'll show real quick, is just about the tobacco use prevention. Comes from the Stanford Medicine program. It's the Positive Youth Development Program. Right here to talk about tobacco basics. It has pictures and things here, but there's so much information here. You can almost do an entire curriculum just from this one resource. And this is something that our teachers will refer to, use as a tool. Last year we did some feedback from some of our students. Mr. Crouse did a principal-student forum. Teachers surveyed students in their classes as well to get some feedback. Here's just a sampling of some of the things that did come back to us. Among 11th and 12th graders, 80% responded that course lessons and activities were valuable and enriched and challenged my understanding of the topics. From Mr. Crouse's forum, there were a wide range of responses. You can imagine getting information from a large group. Recurring theme is the importance of education in stress management, mental health, drug alcohol education, sex education, and nutrition. The nutrition one surprised me because the line over there is much longer than the salad bar routinely on a day in the cafeteria. But they do want to know about it. And then also from BT Connect Tonight, the feedback we will get from you as an audience. I'll read the first and the third one here. A couple anecdotal comments from students on the survey. In the first one, I wish there was more time so that more could be covered. Also, I think having a lab day sometimes was difficult because I would be missing valuable material. We kind of rectified that problem a little bit with the lab days we used to have. And in the health test, you might have some physical science lab Monday, some Tuesdays, some Wednesdays. Very challenging for a teacher to deliver the curriculum that's missing on different days. Scheduling has helped that this year. And then the last one, or the third one, the only real problem was the last topic, contraceptives, which lacked enough time to thoroughly go over and complete the lesson and 2 projects. And that came from the 11th grade student that you presently see. Moving forward, what are we doing from here? Tonight's a start. survey this year, probably towards the end of the school year. We will include community members as well in a stakeholders review. In the summer, we plan to complete the second year of a 2-year formal curriculum review. No changes are planned at this time for next year until at least the 2021-22 school year. I want to see how this goes and what our feedback comes from that. And then in that 2021 school year, maybe there will be, maybe there won't be any changes. We'll see. You'll always see some change in how, as the last paragraph talks about, is that our health curriculum has to change, has to evolve because our societal problems evolve. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, like I mentioned earlier, I did not know what vaping was. Very well aware of what vaping is now, and I think everyone is. Who knows what's coming next? Last page here is just a sampling of many of the resources we use routinely. This is not all-encompassing or exhaustive of all the resources we have, but it shows some of those. Obviously, the New Jersey core curriculum content standards are certainly available. So that concludes my presentation to you. What I'd like to do is maybe open it up to anyone for questions, feedback, comments.
All right, I have a million, but I'll just start with one. You said that the health 10 are adding 15 days. Does that mean that starts tomorrow?
No, it'll start Monday.
So if it starts on Monday, then the 15 days will be after the Thanksgiving or 24.
Yes, I think it's around December 3 or 4, 15th.
When it finishes?
When it finishes.
And then what are they going to be doing in the classes the next week? Because most of the classes finish the actual driver's ed today. What are they doing for the next 2 weeks?
I would have to go check the teacher's lesson plans and see. I can't really answer that without. I mean, you said they took the state test
They took
today.
the test today.
Okay, so I'm sure we'll get feedback on that. You know, some reviews, teachers need to retake it, things of that nature.
And they're still
Okay.
driver's ed.
Still driver's ed though.
Right, but they took the test today,
They're
so
still
what's their
in
left to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to talk to the teachers individually and say what's going on in your class. You know, I can go back and look at their lesson plans and say, That's a good point.
So then but then the 15 days starts Monday.
correct.
So then like the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is also half day, and then they'll go Monday and Tuesday when they come back from Thanksgiving. So then they're gonna switch from health to gym or option 2 in a week. That's the plan.
Yes. Yep. And that's typical. Our marking periods end any day of the week normally. We don't always end on Friday.
I heard some presentation, we didn't need to know any opportunity for families to opt out. Is that something that's available?
Oh, that's always been a part of our part of New Jersey law.
Can we decide which parts to opt out?
Yes.
For example, 1 and 2 are, will they stay as week 1 will be drugs and alcohol, week 2 will be.
What you have to do is you have to submit a letter to the principal.
Right.
All right, and just saying what the areas that you would like that to be opt out. It's possible that teachers might change the order, maybe to share resources,
Okay.
something like that, you
That's
know.
what I need to do.
So I would say if you were things that you want them to opt out, that pretty much though, in all these areas, some of the lessons are new, some of the materials might be new, but in general, the curriculum hasn't changed that much from what we've always been doing. You know, we've always been human sexuality and things like that. That's been in place starting in 6th grade, right through 12th grade. Typically, I've had one student, maybe every other year or so, asked to opt out of a sensitive nature health lesson for religious reasons or whatever. But usually that's for an individual specific lesson, and they are given an alternate assignment.
Did you say, so if you opt out, you can do a different assignment?
They are given, in other words, a student opts out, they are given an assignment by the classroom teacher in an area of health instruction separate than that specific time. Could be on wellness and nutrition, Those tend to be, if it's of any significant length of time, they tend to be project-based.
Would the parent have input in what this alternate topic would be?
No, the teachers will probably, they're going to put, well, we have, I mean, they have project-based assignments they would give. It's an alternate assignment by the teacher.
Was the driver's ed curriculum also revamped, and you said the health curriculum was revamped over the summer?
Minimally. The drive curriculum is pretty standard. That's probably the one subject in all the schools you do teach to the test.
I recall from when my daughter was a sophomore, there was a lot of there were some other extraneous stuff that was really not in the book. Particularly, there was a lot of stuff about like different kinds of insurance. There was like a whole test on insurance. That when we went to try and study for it, the part of the book was maybe this much information. And so to actually try and help her understand all the different types of insurance that I don't understand fully, there was no resources for that. So stuff like that, I'm sort of curious, like what was the major emphasis on that when really for the test? I think you just have to know the basic minimum requirements that you need in order to get it.
Yeah, I would say the curriculum it does teach to the test, but it's beyond the test as well.
Right.
So I would imagine the teachers probably had a PowerPoint or something that would have been a resource there.
Right, but we looked on the website or whatever the teachers looked at. Like I'm saying, there's not a lot of resources available for stuff that's actually not in the book. And I'm just sort of curious, which leads to my next question as to what is the basis for deciding that health should be a grade versus like a pass-fail, particularly driver's ed, but in general, the health curriculum as a whole.
Well, I think it's just like any academic area that students should be graded. Reward those who go above and beyond and do a great job, as opposed to just giving a bare minimum pass.
Right, but if you say things like where children with IEPs don't get support in those classes, there's not a level of class, that kind of thing, it can be a burden, is basically what I'm trying to get at. So if it was a pass-fail, it sort of takes that burden away.
I think it would probably, my own personal opinion, it probably just rewards mediocrity. Not going, students giving their best in many cases. At the same time, I think the teacher's job there is to be able to differentiate for the different learning levels of the kids in the class. They are aware, they read IEPs, things of that nature, so they should be able to address that.
We have other classes here at the high school that don't receive support. Foreign language is an example
Exactly.
of a class that doesn't
Right.
receive support for students with IEPs.
Really, it's not.
And it's the same thing. The teachers are responsible for reading the IEPs and making those adjustments and making those modifications for those students.
Yes.
Parallel line, in terms of part of this seems the intention is to reduce stress and learn how to cope with anxiety and other things. One of the reasons my daughter chose to challenge herself and take some perhaps higher courses than she might otherwise, and she was counting on the study hall as much as she could, and so now she'll have less time to do that study hall. I think there is merit to some of the content and the attention, but I think then also grading it is adding more stress to what's intended to be something that relieves stress. So I'm not sure what the outcome of that is, but I think there should be more awareness of that aspect of this addition to the program. Second, I did want to just triply confirm that if someone's doing option 2, that they don't need to keep track of their hours for these weeks that they're not taking.
No, that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Question came up last week about the YMCA, and how do we notify the YMCA about the students who have 6 weeks of option 2 as opposed to 9 weeks. The irony is that these places, the Y included, don't know what grade levels most of the kids are in. So we can send out, hey, for our 10th graders, please recognize they're only being awarded credit for 6 weeks of option 2. That's going to be our job to, as these reports come in from the places, to note that it was only for that 6 weeks.
Mr. Sheldon and I talked about that. That's our job.
Okay, so
that.
Kids don't have to do anything. Yeah,
Right.
because we thought about it, well, if we notified the Y, but then you find out that somebody's going to Gabriel's Fitness in Berkeley Heights, and somebody's going here, and somebody's in this program, and it's impossible for us to get that information out of all those places, but we will go through as the reports come in.
The last logistic question and content question I'll ask you, but, is that if someone, you opt out for a portion of it, and they have this alternate assignment, it sounded like there's some tests on the content, like they want to cover that content, the student opted out.
Well, the student opted out, they would not be responsible for that material.
So, I have a question about the workload, because we said we were told that you don't want to increase stress by increasing the workload. There was something else that was posted online that it's not here, that shows, it had kind of a more detailed, and it had a list of assignments, and it was something like this, so it says like project on this, project on that, and I was looking at it, and to me, it looked like a lot of homework to squeeze into 3 weeks, so I'm worried about that. I'm also wondering about, like, on this syllabus, and I know this is just one teacher's, but it says we'll complete a small project. How do you define small, and do perhaps our students define small differently than we do? So are you perhaps assigning projects that are a lot of work and are going to create a lot of stress?
I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, I don't know how to define small. I think it's something that can be done with class time and minimal time, but not certainly a lot of time outside of the classroom.
Because I know that like, in driver's ed alone, so far we had 4 tests, we had multiple projects, we've already done, like, this is an academic class, it's not a post-through class, it's, very significant amount of work. So now there's 3 extra weeks of more work, and I think we're all concerned about the stress level of our kids, and our 3 extra weeks of work and push them over the edge. We let them know, well, for some kids it might. So I think we need to kind of like, I think Alicia said about making it pass fail, or being sensitive to just, keeping the projects small, manageable, like the projects, if it's a group project, is it done in class, or do they have to be after class? Is there going to be arranging hours? Is there going to be, a time commitment there? I think we need to know a little bit more specific about that and be sensitive to the demand for putting in our students.
I mean, I think that's a fair point. I can bring that back to our staff. We're going to be meeting, because obviously teachers haven't written lesson plans for most of this yet. They'll be doing that in the near future. And that's typical. Teachers, they've done so while like we have, they work on these, but teachers do their lesson plans about 2 weeks out. It starts next week, so, they will be doing it. We're actually going to be together as a group, sharing some ideas and helping them come up with lesson plans.
Will there be uniformity across all sections
I
for
hope
the
so.
projects? Like, we don't want somebody's version of the project to be more intensive than someone else's version of the project and requirements.
We hope they're as uniform as possible. I can't guarantee that every teachers are not robots that do exactly the same thing, but I think what they expect of the students should be very consistent.
Have all the grade levels of the health been revamped?
Yes.
Or are you saying that?
Big part of those 3 units in 10th grade was to take them out of the other grade levels to some extent, so we could spend more time.
But the actual assignments, like say for the 9th and 11th and 12th, have the assignments been sort of updated and
Yes.
more?
Yes. Yeah, that was a big piece. Like I said, there's kind of a teacher's edition document that the teachers put together. They have a shared drive where they are sharing ideas and assessments and things that they can all.
So
That's
for next
ongoing. That's
summer,
always going.
for next summer, when you said it's like the part 2, so what is the part 2 more like an evaluation of how these lessons work? And so it's not like you're waiting for like 11 and 12. Everyone's been in there for this year. As I go.
Yeah, the review will be across all grade levels.
Next one.
Yeah.
I mean, just the way the curriculum writing works is after a new course is introduced, we have a year 2 revision where we get feedback from the kids, the teachers spend time reflecting on what worked and what didn't work, and then make adjustments. It's just a normal part of the curriculum writing. So for whatever was new this year, the components of every course we did new this year.
Hi. On this description, part of the grading is participation and sort of of how the kid is involved in the class discussion. And that reminded me of a student who came to talk to the board at last Monday's meeting. And she mentioned some of her friends who were not feeling comfortable talking about some personal sensitive issues. And that in turn, actually, they are afraid that affected their grade. And my understanding that this added content in health education, I guess the main purpose is to help the kids to de-stress and showing them there are more tools to do that. And so I totally agree with the previous few parents. I do think, I believe this course, it's much better if they're not graded, rather than like our purpose is to help you. We're not really asking you to do the same thing with math, science, or literature, like we expect, although the same performance in those areas.
And I think the teachers will design lessons and assessments where students can contribute without having to speak out to the whole class, whether it's in small group activities, there's other assessments, projects, assignments, what have you, that they can earn their grades there. If it's an area that they're not comfortable with speaking out in front. You have a class of 30 students, let's say. You may not have, all of them are very outspoken. You may have others who will tend to dominate the conversations and things. And teachers are aware of that. Yes?
So I see here under the grading, it says in class assignments 20%, participation 40, and projects 40. And the projects, they're throughout that 3-week period, and they have to think in small groups. Considering how many students are involved in sports or forensics and constantly missing class, do you feel that 40% for projects is a little bit on the high end? And it becomes difficult also when you have competing students, some like to do more work, some like to do less. I think it's a large part of your grade to depend on group study when there's so many other competing projects.
Just to refresh my memory, does it say group projects or just projects?
It's a small individual and or group project.
So it could be individual and or group, so I can't imagine it being that many of the group projects. And there will be some.
I think to groups as well, that if it was a group project, there are individual components within a group component. They're not all a group grade, and they shouldn't be. So it's a mixture, right? It's not all projects, it's not all groups.
There's been some really healthy dialogue too amongst the health teachers about these 3 weeks. And you know, they definitely hear the community, they hear what you're saying about adding these 3 weeks and the added stress or the component of grading. And there's been some really healthy dialogue amongst the health teachers about that and about making sure that it is meaningful without being stressful. You know, the idea is to kind of close that gap that Mr. Cello showed between the end of freshman year and the end of junior year, to kind of close that gap in health education, because to be honest, we weren't really complying with state law either. And it's a big gap to go those 2 years without the students seeing any kind of information in regards to health. There are things that need to be taught every year, drugs and alcohol related topics, mental health, and suicide prevention being one.
Sure. When you speak, you know, to me, you come across as a college professor, okay, which is great. I'm thinking about students who are nowhere near college maturity. For example, his friends, and my concern is they're going to be in a classroom with girls, it's going to be disruptive, it's going to be, without meaning to, it's going to end up being very uncomfortable. So what I'm worried about is I'm going to get a call from an angry parent, or I'm going to get a call from one of the health teachers because of some inappropriate comment, maybe not said out loud, but under their breath. With the size of the classrooms, my concern is we're going to have a problem. That's been my issue. Can we separate the genders? Because I just feel like we're just putting ourselves into a situation where we're all going to be sorry 3 weeks from now. I'm very concerned about it. And I'll be the first one to admit my son is very silly.
That it's been probably since Title IX came into being in 1972, that these health classes have been mixed gender.
I know they weren't, because I'm just separated from the boys in 5th grade, trust me on
Right
that.
in the younger grades, you're right, but not in the high school.
I think that's a problem. I don't remember that in high school being with other boys, they still separated us in our high school. And honestly, I just feel like we're setting ourselves up for, a tinderbox here.
But it's not.
Right.
Because I don't see what you're teaching. I see high level, but when you start to drill down, I am very concerned. And when I hear it's my son's baseball coach that's going to be teaching that, well, I know the kind of relationship they have on the baseball field. I'm a little concerned. I'm concerned. And I'm concerned for you because it's going to get escalated and then I'm going to have an HIV on my kid. So please understand my concern, which is probably why I'm going to opt him out. Because I just don't feel like the classroom sizes are small enough to have a mature conversation. And that's what I'm looking for.
You feel it's a maturity issue.
Absolutely it is. 10th grade boys are not mature.
Understood, but you realize he's been in these classes since 6th grade already. 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th
But
grade.
not to this level. And I'll tell you what, last year, my twin daughters came home and expressed to us what they learned in 12th grade in front of our son and my husband. The food fell out of my husband's mouth. He couldn't believe what they were discussing at the dinner table because it's not appropriate for his age group. At the time, he was 9th grade. And my husband looked at me like, what the heck? I'm like, I don't know, I didn't make the curriculum. So I am trying to head it off at the pass. This is why I'm here. Please understand, I just don't feel like the maturity level is there for the boys and the girls to be together. And if that's something you can do, I would appreciate it. I think the boys, yes, they should learn, but I just think it would be better.
You mean for all
So-
three
so-
of the units?
Absolutely.
Little story for you from the other side of that is Ken Marsh, who's our boys lacrosse coach. Before coming to Ridge, he taught elementary level, physical education. Came here, had to teach, now high school, I had to teach these materials. And he said, I'm standing up there as a first-year teacher at the high school level with my starting position player, named the position, sitting in the front row in front of my class, and it was awkward. He goes, now I can teach in front of anybody, and it's close. And the kids are, I sit in on observations, and the kids are great. We don't get into the joking, the inappropriate jokes and things in
And
class.
I would hope that that would
It's
really
very
be addressed.
well
because
professionally done.
I have a lot of concern about that.
And I think she says in the syllabus in there somewhere, Ms. Clark,
There
about
is a piece on that.
maintaining the decorum and maturity. I think that's.
It's an important part of what all teachers do. I take it seriously what you're saying, but it is what social studies teachers work on, creating a safe classroom, making kids feel comfortable, being developmentally appropriate at whatever age they're at. And that's the work that we all do with the teachers when Mr. Shell is working with them on the new curriculum. That's part of the topics of our discussion. That was at the heart of the work we're doing on the skills-based. So we weave that in an appropriate way, and it allows kids to explore the content through that lens, maybe takes the focus off of it. So there's a lot of layers of the work we're doing, and that's like our job all the time, and it will be as we're teaching it and reviewing it and updating it. So I hear you, and I agree that that's very important, and it is the work that we're doing.
So let me just kind of read that. So I'm looking at the assessments and resources, like number 1 that says, questions for provider activities, see slide 13 lecture, students will develop a series of questions they might ask a healthcare provider related to safe sex practices. Is that something that's mandated by state law that we have to do, or do we really, because honestly, in this day and age, if they have a question, they're going to Google it, they're not going to be asking the doctor. Do we have to teach them that? Is that something that's mandated?
Well, no, those are things that have to be taught within the standards. That sounds like it's a particular assignment that a teacher might use, in a class, to get it. Yeah, to the standards. Go by answer your question.
Not really.
That's in the standards, right?
Yeah.
So it's required, okay.
You can go to the previously, explore them.
Yeah,
That is the
that's all.
language of the standards.
That's all that is, yeah.
There was something else I noticed in the standards, and I don't know if we changed it, but the handout that came out at back to school night, and it looked like it was changed later, but I don't have it, but one of the things that I objected to last year when I was a senior last year was one of the units that was talking about like IVF. I was like, why do high school students need to learn IVF? And I actually looked up state standards to see if it's included, and it's not. So I'm hoping that's one of the things, for example, that you took out.
Well, that's not in the 10th grade curriculum.
No. That's in, while we're talking about health, that's what I think the 12th grade curriculum, like,
Yeah, we include it in the 12th grade. Sorry, I'm Kim Clark. I was just at a presidential peer leader meeting and came from the practice there, so that's why I'm late. I'm sorry. It is part of the 12th grade, and we do it because we talk about family living and we do the baby project, and just to bring awareness that, pregnancy isn't always, easy as it is, just biologically, the way that it happens automatically. And so we kind of we're talking about the baby project and how, families are made that way. So we thought that it actually initiated, we started a panel. We had people who had experienced IVF and who had experienced international adoption as well as domestic adoption. And the students were allowed to, or we encouraged the students to ask questions. It's actually a really amazing panel discussion. So students got a totally different perspective rather than, what we might consider the stereotypical.
but then it's not required by state standards, it's not in the standards, it's just something extra that you added on that you think is helpful, that maybe not every family agrees with being taught in school. Right? Right.
I don't know for sure that it's not the standard, but
It's
I'll
not
take you at your word. I'll take
I
you
mean,
at your word.
that specific.
That's
might
specific,
not
right,
be-
because I was looking for
but I
some
think
specific
it's
things that I was
relevant to
upset
the
about
subject.
last year, reviewing the curriculum when I was senior last year.
But sort of the language of the standard is around the idea of family life, as you described, and so then in curriculum writing, that would be where that came from the teachers and professionals who design the projects around surveys and research says kids can, should, and want to learn about. So it's not that it doesn't come from nowhere, it doesn't come from the standard, it comes from other resources.
But it was also on that horrible intensive handout that I spoke about at the Board of Ed meeting, it was part of that project. It was part of that project, like, oh, if things don't,
Right.
if you're unlucky, you might have to adopt or have IVF, or you might get someone with a birth defect. They were all listed as like problems. So I'm really sensitive to that, and I want to make sure that none of that junk stayed in revised curriculum.
That is right.
Okay.
Yes.
No,
We'll
I
go
just,
here and then we'll go here.
That's right.
I'm a fan of Rosella.
no. Oh, wait,
Let's
right?
keep it that way.
Take it outside.
I'm not a
So I was just looking at some of the resources, and I clicked the link for under abstinence. It says to look under Planned Parenthood and type abstinence. And the whole page just equates abstinence with outer sex and says people plan to keep abstinent, but you should keep condoms around just in case. So that to me is not a good ways for a kid to explore that option. So I just encourage you to perhaps look for more resources under that heading. And directors want also didn't really have anything useful. And the kid really wanted to know what that meant. Even if they decided not to pursue that approach. I was curious, the original listing of the health curriculum had said in 9th grade that there were certain topics that were going to be explored, and now it's the name change to human sexuality. Is that just a name change, or are they still intending to, at the time it listed like gender and sexual orientation conversations, which my kid would not be 10th grade would not be perfect time. Is that still in this? I mean, I have a screenshot of it said gender and
That was-
I mean, I'm not,
Right,
I think
it was
I'm whether
just-
I think it's perfect, because that's still intended to be part of the
So you're talking about what was presented Monday night?
I wasn't at that one yet. No, it was the original, what was available online. And it already changed by, they actually just say human sexuality.
Is that in
But it didn't
Rubicon?
know that.
Is that in the Rubicon?
It was in that, like, one sheet.
But that is
On back to school day, we got a sheet passed out that had a list of what housing, and it said those terms in the 9th grade. And then my language changed to sexuality, which is fine, I just wanted clarification on whether there's intention to.
I mean, I'm not sure what was changed, but that is what is in the ninth grade curriculum.
Gender and sexual orientation.
I'm not sure what was changed, but
It wasn't in ninth grade, no. That was a change that we made based on feedback from our student assistance counselors and, the data within the school, just from students, like what are topics that you feel should be covered or we could cover more. So that was based on that feedback. Why did we make that change to shift there?
I think that parents should just be made aware of that. I don't think eighth grade parents are aware of that. And again, we're not, like, I'm not an expert, not saying that we're not be included, but I think parents should have knowledge to choose whether to expose their child to that age.
Understanding the idea that we may or could have students in that situation, and they'll be faced with a real life situation. So we might want to educate that.
like in here. Students facing them here, like in the building, in the room with them, from ninth grade on.
So how is that lesson taught? How is that lesson taught? I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself as a ninth grader and not knowing that that's happening. But the person that actually is affected, does the teacher pick up on clues? I mean, I would hope that they do, but I don't know, I feel like it's creating more of an issue. And is there another way to do this that is not uncomfortable for the kids? I'm always worried about the discomfort factor. Maybe that's what you're trying to get at. I personally don't like teaching that way because to me is negative reinforcement. I prefer more of a positive reinforcement. I want kids to be educated, but on their terms and at their pace. Because not all ninth graders are created equal, or 10th graders. To me, that's more of a 12th grade conversation. And you're saying, well, these kids need to be aware of it. But what's the underlying reason? The underlying reason is because you're concerned about bullying. And that goes back to parenting. And you teach your kids to be kind no matter what these kids, no matter what it is, they're dyeing their hair pink, or they seem a little bit more different than others, it's fine, be kind, and then we don't have a problem. And then at 12th grade or 11th grade, when you have a little bit more maturity, they can process it. I'm sorry, but I just don't think the 9th and 10th graders are mature enough. And I know because I work with kids all the time. I can see the kind of jokes they tell, and I even have to do a tone out on some of the jokes because they don't understand what they're saying because their minds just haven't grown fast enough. I don't know what it is.
And I want to speak a little bit to the lesson because this was a new unit that we developed for our ninth graders. So we were super sensitive about it and trying to figure out what's the best way. So what we really tried to relay to the students is more of definitions and understanding different components of sexuality, where it's not just the direction of your sexual desires, but there's a whole gamut of other things that go into that. And so we did try to remain really sensitive and neutral on the topic where, hey, here are the different dimensions of sexuality without really diving too far in and really making it more of like just bringing awareness to those different components that people right there sitting in class with them could be working through. So we really tried to make it more of an informational unit rather than necessarily like an exploratory unit that has more room for that type of bullying that you're talking about and that type of discomfort. Because we want our students to feel comfortable in that classroom where they can talk about sensitive topics, but you're absolutely right. There may be times where they're not ready for those serious conversations. So putting that in ninth grade, we were really sensitive to make sure that the information being presented and the way that it was presented, it's going to definitely be a little bit more lecture style and really talking about these are all the different components to think about. Although you may be feeling one way, these are some different components to for sure, yeah, that's a great way. That's a great way to explain it. Definitely.
Yeah, I would say that our health staff, they know your feelings of everyone, and they know that they're under some scrutiny and it's going to be closely examined. The last thing they want is any kind of controversy in their class, and they will present things as professionally and informationally and clinically, as you said, as possible, to avoid any of these problems. You know, the goal is not to make kids feel uncomfortable, but it's to come to understand what's going on in the real world. Yes, it is your turn.
Yeah, it is my turn. But this wasn't what I was going to originally say, but have a comment, and then I'll know what I was going to say. What I was originally going to talk about, I just find it, I don't know what word to use, it's comical, that this school district is not teaching grammar. Ever, in any kind of literature class that we can teach about every gender under the sun, but grammar is not taught. I have a real problem with that, and that's a story for another day.
I'll talk to the English supervisor on another language.
But you know what, but that's the whole thing about what we're teaching our kids, right? We've left a lot of things out, about very important subjects that are going to help these kids become scientists or journalists or anything, but we're talking about all this stuff over here, right? But anyway, that's another subject. But went over very quickly about sex education, and I don't want you to go in depth, but based on what Stella said and some things we're talking about, like, I want to know what we're talking about. And I literally, I don't have a problem with it. I worked in women's reproductive health for 15 years, and worked very closely on getting contraception and Plan B over the counter, but I want to know what you're talking about. Like, how can we get the curriculum so I know what we're teaching my daughter, like, how graphic it is. I mean, I've taught her about contraception already, but what are you telling her? What are you telling? So our anal sex up there. What are you talking about? Anal sex with your kids. I mean, that to me is, I want to know.
I think what they would say about that, I can't speak for Ms. Clark, but what they're going to say is, it is such a thing. But
I think, you know, it's important to know too, especially once we get in high school, we're trying to build off of knowledge that maybe they got in middle school about contraceptives or reproductive practices. We're not standing up there in more of a clinical approach with those types of topics. We're not saying, you know, this is, you know, going through each contraceptive. It's much more of, okay, can you, and I can speak to the health time lesson, it's where could you access, you said that you worked in women's reproductive health, where could you access reliable and valid information should you make the decision not to be abstinent? Because abstinence is number one. That's the only guaranteed way that you can prevent against unwanted pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. If you choose not to go that way, then where could you access reliable information?
But I guess my point is, where could we get information so we can possibly reinforce some of these issues at home, right? Or have further the conversation.
Right.
I mean, that, to me.
I think right in that document where I did put up the one PowerPoint, it's right in there. If you were to go to
There's not more.
Everything is linked in
This is
here.
what there is.
yeah.
Now, and I hear your point, like I want to know exactly what is being taught. So sometimes there'll be a discussion, we can ask them, you know, what are some reliable resources? How do you know that that's reliable information? How do you know that that's a good source? So we talk about exploring that. What are some questions that you would ask a healthcare provider? Those are some of the assignments that in that document are there. What are some questions that you could ask the health provider? How do you know that the health provider is the right fit for you? So we're really, it's less content-based and it's a shift for a lot of us, I think, and it's more skill-based. This idea of like, teach your kids to be kind. All right, so let's teach them a life skill, like how do you choose, you know, your gynecologist? What makes the right choice for you? And we're not saying you need to choose a gynecologist, but we're saying how can you choose to make, or how can you access information to make healthful decisions for you? And that's really what our bigger picture is as the health department. And I know I came in late and I may be reiterating some of the messages, but I just think it's really important to be clear that our overall objective when we've been working with this curriculum is to really help provide your children, our students, with life skills through the content. So a lot of this is content that they have received. They've received some of this content. Now we're asking them to think a little bit deeper and to start engaging in some of the life skills that they can take with them outside this content. So, you know, that's our overall objective, to help provide them with skills that they're going to use. And I tell my students I ask how many of you think about the food that you eat, how many of you make decisions about whether or not you're going to exercise, how many of you consider what doctor you're going to go to and the best medical practices. These are skills that you do, many of you, on a daily, weekly basis, health-related things. So our mission as health educators is to help your students with those skills and to help lead a healthful life.
They do know their mind, that they just can't go ahead and go and do these things. Because, by the way, who's paying the bill? Not them. So please remind them that.
Oh, we do. I talk about insurance all the time.
It sounds like, I get the whole life skills, but I'm supposed to be a Girl Scout today, and I just told her I'm not coming. Life skills are important. What's also important is that you include your family, because your family is there to support you.
For sure.
I don't want them, oh, I know how to use this, we'll do it behind my parents' back.
Yeah.
That is.
I think actually that might be an interesting even thing to add when we talk about healthcare providers. How would that conversation go with your family?
That's right.
And so that could be an interesting thing to add as well, just to put that caveat in there. We're not, and we talk about insurance, I do that with my seniors. I grew up on a dairy farm in Maine. My parents, they still own the dairy farm. We didn't have health insurance. My mom had a baby, I had my appendix out. My dad, we didn't have insurance. And so that's, something that a lot of the students here are like, what do you mean it costs money to go to the doctor? What do you mean it's not just a $25 copay? So we are, those are definitely, and I like that idea of adding that in there. Like, how would you have that conversation with your family?
The idea of teaching life skills from when they become adults.
Not text, don't text your parents about it. Have a conversation.
Snapchat.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the good intention and effort put into this new design, but personally, I just feel like maybe some of the parents already mentioned, some of the contents are just way too early, at least for the kids I'm familiar with. And also, I wish some of the contents can be as parents, I'm more than willing to share that part of responsibility, and some of the material I really would prefer to discuss with my kids at home. And I think it's back in 9th grade, or maybe even 8th grade, I don't remember. I think in one of the lessons, a short video was shown to them about delivery. And actually, the younger kids, same grade, but younger kids or less mature kids, they were disturbed when they came home. And so now I just have that leads to my question. The slides that were mentioned in the syllabus, are they available for parents to take a look at first? Or what is the link?
Two places. It's in this PowerPoint, but you can also get it by going to the district curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know where that is?
Yes.
And as far as
in both places.
as far as the sex education piece for Health 10, it's very much, like I mentioned, the skill of accessing reliable information. That's really our main focus there. Like I said, we're not standing up and clicking through slides and saying, this is what this is the picture of this is how this works. It's very much, hey, how can you access information? Hey, let me take a look at that. Do you really think that that's the best source of information related to contraceptives? And really going through what makes a valid and reliable source, how could you access that information and make sure that it's valid and reliable.
I was just going to say, this is your syllabus, and I do like a lot of the kind of maybe new methods that you use, like the current events and the decision-making processes, and I think that with a teacher like yourself, who's very enthusiastic, very coachable, very I just worry that not everyone's lucky enough to get to know my idea. And so I hope, and this is, my thing is I know you're saying you all work collaboratively, but I don't know if everyone wants to make the effort that perhaps we make. And so I think that makes it unfortunate for the kids to kind of get stuck. You said the mediocrity. Well, I think unfortunately my daughter's been stuck in mediocrity in the past in this particular subject area. So I just hope that as a supervisor, you can encourage all of the teachers to come up with meaningful lessons, not just PowerPoints, not just tests, or just say, go do this activity, but really to have the current events, things that make it real. Whenever my daughter talks about health and economics, it's because someone did an article or a speaker came in that she could relate to as, like 17-year-old.
Yeah.
So that's just my worry. I hope that it can all look like this, and I'm sort of interested to see how some of the 12th grades that have been revamped, because I think it's a lot of good information that has provided a good instructor, a good activity really will be valuable to her before she goes to college next year. So that's sort of my hope. That's also my fear at the same time, that it's not always effective.
And I'll just want to talk to that for a minute, because that was a big focus for us too this summer. Hey, let's get as many resources as we can together. Let's really try to create a uniform approach and make it accessible to everyone, and get together and really try to make sure that we're on the same page. And we're all obviously have our own teaching style, our own strengths, our own weaknesses, but at least make sure that all of our material and many of the assessments are all, really uniform and sharing that the same objectives, essentially. So that was a big push. We have a gigantic document, we have a gigantic shared drive that we worked on this summer, so we're hoping, yeah.
And what they've also done is they've kind of divided up each of these areas, and a couple of them are working on this, a couple of them working on the alcohol, drug, and et cetera piece, others on another section. They're going to get together, combine, and share ideas, and the group does. They work very collaboratively in that way. Like I said before, they're aware of the concerns, and they want to make sure that this goes as seamlessly as possible.
My comments, concerns actually link what was just mentioned, but beforehand I just wanted to play devil's advocate. I think virtually all of the students here have a smartphone or have other access to the internet. So I'm just wondering, with the comments, oh, are they too young for this or that? Do we really think that whatever the teachers tell them is any worse than what they can find online at any time? And it's probably safer for them to be out in the classroom to really be directed to the right resources, rather than Googling anal sex and then see what pops up. That's just my thing, and we can kind of shelter them until they're really old and we think they're old enough. But the problem is that maybe just human nature has already, by the time they're mature enough to talk about sex, 30% of them might have already actually had sex, even if they're not mature enough to talk about it. So that was just my thing. My concern, though, is that a lot of the curriculum seems to be prescribed by the state standards and other things, but we don't want this to be just a checkbox exercise. We really want to affect some kind of behavior in terms of safe sex, safe alcohol use when they're older, drug use, vaping, whatever. And the experience I've had from the middle school, I haven't had any experience yet on how it's taught here, but in the middle school it seemed to be a lot of watch a video, do a worksheet, watch a video, do a worksheet. And I was just like, does this really impact their behaviors? So I'm just wondering whether there is any other creative ways that we can do to really get the message across, and then also, encourage them to have that conversation maybe then with their families at home to see, okay, this is what we heard in school, how do we as a family think about it? But for example, one of the presentations earlier was done by the student assistance counselors. So rather than having someone kind of just read off the slides and presenting it, should those people come in and maybe talk about it? Or when we talk about mental health, rather than, again, doing the presentation, do we maybe want to spend the week on, I don't know, teaching them some yoga or relaxation or meditation techniques? I don't know what it is, but it shouldn't just be like, okay, this is the state standard, we've done it.
Right, and I think that's something that we strive very much so to do, that we're preparing these kids to be adults, and that's ultimately what our goal is. And I think that's when we give them activities that might be simulating real life experiences. In our senior health, I've talked about this before, one of the assignments they do, which I think is just great, because kids are going off to college in a year. And to to have their research, mental health resources at a college. So they know how to find help if they should need things of that nature. But it puts them in real life situations to try and find those things. So I think we're very attuned to that.
And that's a big part too. I know Ms. Clark mentioned skill-based instruction, and that's a big part of the new curriculum revamp too, and all of the shared materials that the teachers are able to use now. Skills-based means taking something like decision-making and having that be the emphasis, the decision-making in terms of alcohol use, vaping, those types of things. So they're taking those life skills and really having that be the emphasis in whatever lesson or unit the teacher is working on. So that they do have those life skills. They do have the ability to kind of make it real life. In middle school, they learn how to classify drugs. And so I know what a depressant looks like. I know what marijuana is. But now they're working on being able to kind of be able to make good decisions and use that in real life.
I think that's a good point. The middle school will get kind of that basic structure of knowledge, knowing the types of drugs, knowing the parts of the male and female anatomy, things of that nature. The high school is more geared to the processes and the skills-based part of it, so the students can make use of good decision-making, of research, to find the proper or the best ways to do things. Yes?
All right, I have two more things. So one, you said you won't be changing this again until at least 2021, 2022. So can I make a plea, please, on behalf of the class of 2022? We're the ones that are we're the guinea pigs for all these changes. Can you not change it? Can you lead another year to work out? We're the first ones that have to go through these 3 extra weeks. Don't add more weeks to our senior year. Do it to the year to the class.
We were speaking about 10th grade.
What?
We were speaking about 10th grade.
Oh, you'll be adding more weeks to 10th? Because at one point it was like, oh, well, we might add more weeks to junior year. We might add more weeks to
We were just,
senior
so there
year.
was a question that's been raised recently about whether we're going to extend to 3 weeks. And so we were just trying to clarify for next year, there won't be any changes.
Okay, so our current sophomores are not going to get stuck with 3 extra weeks junior year and 3 extra weeks
Well-
senior year, Alyssa? Or can you tell us, can you just can we do this change and then let the current freshmen, let them be the guinea pigs for the next year? Our class is getting hit with everything. It is true.
We've had no discussions of anything.
Okay. All right, the other thing I want to get to before we're done is, can you possibly go back to that slide about mental disorders? Speaking about sensitivity, I had a big problem with that slide.
I don't remember which one that was. Was that embedded in one of the other?
It's in the
PowerPoint?
It's Tony and PowerPoint,
Okay.
right? Tony's PowerPoint.
So I know we want to talk about mental health stigma, so maybe when we're talking about stigma, we don't want to use the word mental disorder and then list things like anxiety, depression, which a lot of the kids who are your current students will be sitting in that classroom are already suffering and dealing with those things. And for them to have to look at a slide and talk about how it's a mental disorder is really not sensitive. And maybe we could change the language and call it mental health issues. And how these things are normal and how these are things that are normal, sounds a great word, but these are things that lots of kids your age experience. Instead of going through disorders at your age, you might have things wrong with you. Here's the ways you can be broken. Depression, you're broken. Anxiety, you're broken. Bipolar, you're broken. It doesn't, but what it does, but the word disorder. The word disorder.
Well,
It is an old-fashioned term that people used to use before people got more sensitive. If you change it to mental health issues, you can talk about a range of issues without calling it disorder, because disorder just promotes stigma. It continues the stigma.
So I was going to say that was certainly a topic of discussion. And I personally looked up what is the right way to say this. Is it a mental health issue? Is it a mental health disorder? So after researching and looking on, I'm blanking on, it's the National Institute of Mental Health. Yeah, they were listed as disorders. So that's why I went to the national, and I hear what you're saying. But when we did that portion, that's why, because it was something that caught my eye as well.
Okay, but could we, there's a better word we can use. that isn't going to trigger, because I can meet 5 kids right now that are going to be triggered by that one disorder. Can we be sensitive enough? Can we change it to issue? Does it matter? Do we have to call it disorder? Disorder is stigmatizing. It absolutely is. It
I know, I'm
absolutely
saying,
is.
don't you think issue has the same kind of, like now you're saying that.
Issue,
they have an issue.
you know, issue can be a current issue. Issue can be like, you know,
It can be a problem too, so it's kind of.
Yeah, that's what, because I struggle
an
with
issue
both.
is something
It's
to
an
talk
issue.
about. A disorder means, okay, there's a right and a wrong. Disorder is a stigmatizing word.
But that doesn't mean disorder is ever good. I don't think I ever had a problem, where an issue is more of a, maybe unusual thing that it could be
It's
generic.
right, an issue can be, health class, should we add more health? That's an issue. There's multiple sides, you can talk about it. Disorder means one side is broken.
I know, and I think of it as a clinical term. It's clinical terminology, and, you know, these are students, they're old enough to understand clinical terminology.
I think that's what you probably researched.
Yeah.
And that's
Right, I mean, as soon as I saw that slide, I started thinking, well, am I wrong to be triggered by this? And I started doing a Google search, and I just found right here while I was sitting here on my phone, 10 articles that said, please don't use the word disorder, and use issue. Use enough, you know, it's depending on what you're looking at, depending on who you're asking. Are you asking psychologists for their opinion? You know, ask some of the counselors.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I just think disorder is a triggering word, and if one of our concerns is to, you know, not stigmatize mental illness, but then we'll put up the side that says mental disorders, and here, you know, this is the age when things can go wrong. Here's a list of things can go wrong, and one of those is depression. And honestly, how many kids do you think are in your classes right now who already have depression? They don't need to see that thing that tells them that they're wrong, that tells them that that's a disorder, that tells them that they're less than, they're broken. Like, we're creating the stigma that we're trying to decrease. I'm begging you, please, change the words. We'll get to the phone. Thank you.
It's a good discussion for us to have, I mean, obviously, and I look at any of those things as being on a continuum, you know, of, you know, it's something like anxiety, you know, I mean, we all feel anxious at times. You know, when is it normal, when is it happening?
Somebody brought up the issue of the SACs and their contributions to the health classes, and that's something that I know this summer we worked on quite a bit, having Tony involved in the curriculum writing, and to the extent that they are able to come into the class and talk about sort of topics, we're trying to evaluate that as part of the curriculum writing as well. And I think one of the interesting things is having a lot of these clinical discussions with the students in a clinical kind of way, right? And at the same time having either Tony or somebody else talking about the brain development of an adolescent and their ability to actually apply the clinical things that you're trying to teach them at a time when their brain maybe isn't really working so well. And I mean, if you have teenagers, you know what I'm talking about, right? And it goes well beyond just teenage, right? You're gonna have kids in college in their early 20s with their brains still not fully formed. So it's almost like you're trying to teach them that your brain doesn't really necessarily work right at the moment that you want it to. And it's sort of this awareness that, you know, at least have the awareness that you may run into a situation where, you know, you're predisposed to making a bad decision. And I think that this introduces...
Yeah, that wasn't the slide.
No, I know that wasn't the slide,
It was in
but to the question
it was in
about
that
like
presentation.
how can we bring in expertise to talk about things like this at a time where you're also trying to get the kids to think properly about making decisions about these really important things. I think it's a really, you know, I was really happy to see this when I was looking through the materials, that introducing this and talking to the kids about this aspect about their decision making is really important, and where we can bring in folks like Tony to help with that, I think that's great. So that's good.
I just want, and this goes back to, again, last year's discussion and words that were used in the former curriculum, and we need, you know, I don't understand how on one hand we can talk about, like, let's decrease the stigma around mental health, but then put up a slide that says mental disorders and depression. you know, I belong to a lot of groups, and for example, like parents of kids with autism call them kids with autism because of the thing that is first language. But if you talk to adults who have autism, we prefer to be called autistics, and we say, well, it's the grown-ups telling us what we're supposed to be, but we want to be called autistic. So if you talk to actual students, you talk to teenagers with depression, ask them, do you feel like putting up that word, mental disorder, and listing depression, is that stigmatizing to you? Is that triggering to you? I think you're going to find that they're going to say yes. You can call it, you can call it a clinical discussion, but teenagers are not clinicians. They are teenagers with feelings who don't want to feel the stigma.
We're almost done.
A quick question, I agree with you, and I hope that you agree with that, but when you talk about all these things about sex education and alcohol, we're a high-performing school. Do you talk about choices made and consequences as a result of those choices? Because I see abstinence, but then, you're going to need it to feel they have to go and practice sex. I'm sorry, there's no practicing. You are on an academic track. Do you explain that when you make choices, there will be consequences? These kids work really hard to excel academically. We don't want them derailed. I get that you're trying to give them skills, but I feel like we're introducing a dangling carrot, and that's how it feels to me. Like, I've got my kids focused on the long game. To me, this is the little goodies along the way.
No, actually, that's really similar to how we present it. The whole decision-making process is huge. Okay, if you make this decision, identify some of the consequences of this decision that you're about to make.
Are you asking them what the consequences are?
We talk.
I don't think they know.
Right. So then it's a discussion. So then it's a back and forth, and then it's okay. Let's bring in our knowledge related. Let's say, because that's one of the big messages in our drug and alcohol unit. All right, so let's talk about some of the consequences of choosing to, drink underage, or choosing to get in the car with someone who's been drinking. And then we go through and talk about the different consequences and how they would impact you long term. We do a whole goal setting unit, actually. As part of freshman health, we did a goal setting unit, and then throughout the marking period, we go back to those goals. Okay, we just did a drug and alcohol unit. How would that impact those goals that you set, short-term and long-term, should you choose to engage in underage drinking? How about we do a bullying unit? If you get an HIV, how's that going to impact? If you're unkind to someone, how's that going to impact those goals? So we really do try to build the curriculum around a skill like decision-making where we emphasize those consequences.
And I'm glad that you do. But alcohol and drugs and driving while you're under the influence, that's personal. When you engage in sex and the result of pregnancy, it's not just you now. It's you, the partner, and now potentially the baby. So now you have 3 people involved. My point is, are you getting that message across? Because that has to be a very strong message.
We try as hard as we possibly can to get that message across. But I think we try to do it through discussion where kids come to that realization on their own. Not being told. We have, believe me, I know, I raised 3 kids. We have great kids making bad decisions every weekend. I won't stick my head in the sand about that. We know that. And at the same time, Natalie, our former principal used to say, no student graduates from Ridge High School not knowing that drugs are bad for them. But do they really process that and make the right decisions? And that's what we try and get to. It's not easy. If it was easy, the whole country would have figured this out and we wouldn't have the problems we have in society. It's a huge societal problem.
There was one slide you showed that actually concerned me that said, looking at the positive and negative sides of sex. There's some positives, I'm not going to do whatever, but the negative side said you could get an STD or perhaps get pregnant. But don't worry, there's ways we can get around that. And I'm like, what? I mean, there are, but like, you make it sound like it's like, like it's really something you don't need to worry about, which is
I
not
can
a good
show
way.
you that's not how it's being presented.
That's
We're
right.
not saying it's okay, there's plenty of ways to get around it.
Don't worry,
Go for it.
it wasn't work around, but it was like, there were solutions to it. And so just like, I would hope that some of the emotional aspect of that topic is
brought into this, like that, then maybe that part is a little less clinical.
Yeah.
Yes, they need to learn what to do.
The senior health project they did, the baby project, really illustrates this program.
Well, I kind of meant the emotional impact of the experience, let alone the outcomes, but just getting back to the bigger picture, like, I think it's great that there's access to this kind of information. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know it's a little distant, but like, the access and what you collected is wonderful. I still find it a little odd that it's required of all the students and then it's graded. So as you review this, please keep that in the back of your mind that, kids are gonna feel a little more pressure, like, wait, well, why don't I have some of these issues? Maybe if they're like feeling like everyone has this and they need to, do projects on it and stuff. So, the program itself looks very solid, but it's very weird to me that these very sensitive topics are required to be.
Right? So on that, we appreciate all of your feedback. We've all taken notes. We will certainly keep it in mind as we go forward with the units and as we revise it next summer. I'm always open for feedback. We're looking for one more opportunity, so it'll be in the spring. April 6th. At April 6th. So, April has been taught, so the kids, parents can come and give us some feedback on that point. Certainly not to say you can't reach out and ask questions in the interim, that's certainly fun too, but this was, the intention was for a dialogue. I think we had a dialogue, and we will take your feedback tomorrow. We really want to do the best for all of the kids. Thank you.
And do wish Coach Park good luck in the state semifinals tomorrow.
I can't
Field
believe
hockey.
that.